aid the revolutionary cause. 1881. In New Jersey, President James Garfield dies of wounds inflicted by an assassin 2.5 months earlier. Vice President Chester Arthur becomes president, serving the rest of Garfield's term in office. 1934. In New York City, Bruno Hauptmann is arrested for the kidnap and murder of the infant son of aviator Charles Lindbergh. Hauptmann is later convicted and executed in New Jersey for the crime, insisting to the end that he's innocent. 1995. In a controversial move, the New York Times and the Washington Post publish an anti-technology manifesto by the Unabomber. That leads to the arrest months later of Theodore Kaczynski for the Unabomber attacks that killed 3 people and wounded 23 others. In 1970, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, the classic TV sitcom, premieres on CBS. Today in History, September 19th. Ed Donahue, The Associated Press.
Welcome back to Studio 26 on this Thursday, and coming up in just a moment we'll have market information, the CBS World News Roundup, News of the Weird, plus a whole lot more, along with new programs, the Composer's Notebook in a little bit, the Composer's Date Book, as well as, where's the other one at? I just saw it. The Writer's Notebook, I believe that's the name of the program. That's coming up after our quick commercial break. So stick around. More First Cup is on the way in your podcast player of choice. I'm your host, that wacky Joe Haffner.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me.
Uh-oh, George again.
Ooh, Atari's ASC battle.
It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
Blackjack. Oh!
I'd like an Atari.
Sorry, only our demonstrators left.
Mine!
No, George. Mine.
The new video computer system by Atari. More games, more fun.
With the Potty Putter, you'll take the time to play with your putter.
Only in the forest can you see this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. And you might just see this. Visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
And here is the Writer's Almanac for Thursday. It's the 19th of September, 2013. It was on this day, 1796, President George Washington gave his farewell address, in which he urged Americans to relinquish their personal or geographical interests for the good of the national interest, and warned against partisanship. The birthday of William Golding, born in St. Columb Minor, Cornwall, England, 1911, joined the Navy, served on a rocket launcher, took part in the D-Day operations at Normandy. He wrote a novel about a group of English schoolboys whose plane crashes on a desert island and who descend into savagery. The title of the book, from the word Beelzebub, translated from Hebrew into English, Lord of the Flies, came out in 1954 and became a classic. It was on this day, 1819, John Keats, 24 years old, wrote his poem, which begins, "Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core." His ode to autumn. It was a productive year for John Keats, 1819. He wrote his Ode to a Nightingale, Ode to a Grecian Urn, Ode to Psyche, all in that year. Died 2 years later at the age of 25. It's the birthday of the essayist and editor Roger Angell, born in New York City in 1920, who grew up with the New Yorker magazine. His mother was the magazine's first fiction editor. She divorced his father, and she married the New Yorker essayist E.B. White. Roger Angell became a fiction editor at the magazine in 1956, still a senior editor, edited the stories of John Updike, Donald Barthelme, Vladimir Nabokov, and in 1962 he told the editor, William Shawn, about baseball spring training, which Shawn had never heard of, and sent Roger Angell to Florida on assignment, and it was the beginning of Roger Angell's long career writing about the sport. He said, sports writers weren't supposed to be fans, but I would write in the first person about my own emotions, which you were not supposed to do. People used to laugh at me because my World Series pieces came so late, sometimes after Thanksgiving. But Shawn didn't have a sense of deadline. Shawn thought, everybody knows what the news is, now tell us something else about it. Roger Angell said about baseball, it's a great game for writers because it's just the right pace. You can watch the game and keep score and look around and take notes. Now and then, you even have time to have an idea, which in many sports you don't have room for. Here's a poem for today by Theodore Roethke, Child on Top of a Greenhouse. The wind billowing out the seat of my breeches, my feet crackling splinters of glass and dried putty, the half-grown chrysanthemums staring up like accusers, up through the streaked glass, flashing with sunlight. A few white clouds, all rushing eastward, a line of elms plunging and tossing like horses, and everyone pointing up and shouting. Theodore Roethke's poem Child on Top of a Greenhouse, from the collected poems of Theodore Roethke published by Anchor Books and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac. Supported by the Poetry Foundation, you can turn your iPhone or Android into a virtual poetry library with the Poetry Foundation's Poetry app, available to everyone online at poetryfoundation.org/mobile. Produced by Joy Biles, assistance from Kathy Roach. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.
Missing.
This is the Composer's Datebook for September 19th. I'm John Zek. On today's date in 2002, just a little over a year after the events of 9/11, the New York Philharmonic premiered a new work by the American composer John Adams. Entitled On the Transmigration of Souls, this would be the most high-profile commission that sought to address a nation still in shock and grief at the terrorist attack of September 11th, 2001. I realized right up front that the public didn't need any more reiteration of the narrative of that day, Adams said in an interview. Certainly it didn't need some tasteless dramatization of the events. He said, if I was going to do something meaningful, I was going to have to go in the opposite direction. Adams chose to set some of the words scribbled on posters plastered around Ground Zero by families searching for their loved ones. He said, they were a mixture of hope and a slowly dimming acceptance of reality. When people are deeply in shock, they don't express themselves in fancy language. They speak in the most simple of terms. Adams included a tape of city sounds and survivors' voices that he wove into the choral litany of his found texts. He said he hoped his new piece would provide memory space, a musical work that could be at once a platform for either communal or personal reflection. Composer's Datebook is produced by APM, American Public Media, in conjunction with the American Composers Forum, reminding you that all music was once new.
It's not nice to fool Mother Nature, but what if it's the Federal Reserve fooling financial markets? From APM in New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the global perspective on business and economics. The Federal Reserve's big surprise, its bond-buying stimulus, will just keep on coming. The U.S. economy is not strong enough yet to taper off, was the logic that caught the market consensus off guard. The Dow went up 147 points, 1% yesterday to 15,676, a record-closing high. The S&P hit a new record as well, with the prospect of corporate and consumer borrowing costs staying lower rather than higher, moving into the autumn. In Europe this morning, a similar effect. The FT 100 in London is up 1.4% at the moment. Marketplace's Stephen Beard has more from the British capital.
Investors here have been pleasantly surprised by the Fed announcement. They had been expecting a cut of at least $10 billion a month in the Fed's bond purchases. The fact that the purchases will go on as before and the flood of cheap money will continue has buoyed up stock and bond prices in Europe today. Some economic analysts, however, are not celebrating. Howard Wielden says the Fed's stimulus is beginning to look permanent.
Where do you end? Where do you stop? Do we reach a period where it is actually impossible to stop it and it goes on a permanent basis? I think that would be extremely dangerous.
Another leading London commentator said the Fed's decision could lead to another massive bubble in stock and house prices, leading to another catastrophic implosion that would make the last crisis look like a blip. In London, I'm Stephen Beard for Marketplace.
It's taken more than 2 years to get this from a law passed in Congress and signed by the president into a new SEC proposal this week. Companies have to publish a statistic for all to see. Take the CEO's pay and divide by the median compensation of all employees. This pay ratio idea gained strength during the financial crisis. Marketplace's Mark Garrison examines what might be gleaned when one of these ratios comes in at, say, 200 to 1 or 1,000 to 1.
Companies say they don't like pay ratios because they're complicated and expensive to calculate. There's some merit to that, but let's say someone finds an easy way to do the math. Stanford business professor Dave Larker says the resulting rankings won't be fair.
Retail, supermarkets, and things like that, you're going to have a lot of workers that are paid at a fairly low level. It's just the nature of that business, and that ratio is, generally speaking, going to be quite high.
A Bloomberg analysis shows J.P. Morgan Chase and Chipotle had similar CEO pay but completely different pay ratios, simply because bankers make a lot more than burrito rollers. Whole industries could look bad. But University of Denver law professor Jay Brown says that worry misses the point.
While maybe other people can take it out of context and use it for different reasons, the reality is securities laws are designed to inform shareholders, and this information is useful in making an informed decision when they vote on executive compensation.
He thinks pay ratios will be helpful as a way to compare how companies change pay packages over time. In New York, I'm Mark Garrison for Marketplace.
Now let's check the numbers. I mentioned the FTSE, and the DAX index in Germany is up 1.1%. The typically volatile Nikkei in Japan closed up 1.8%. Stock index futures for the U.S. are up again this morning. The 10-year Treasury yield is way down to 2.71%, which makes sense if the Fed is going to keep on buying, say, $85 billion in bonds next month to keep the stimulation going. Banks are under fire for a lucrative side business, buying and selling physical commodities like oil and precious metals. Critics say this can drive up the costs of commodities, a cost borne ultimately by consumers. Regulators are looking into this, and now the financial services industry's largest lobby group has funded a report saying banks provide a small but vital role in the supply of natural resources, smoothing out the markets and making prices more predictable. These days, banks can operate power plants, oil tankers, and own warehouses full of metal like platinum and aluminum. Among the authors of the industry-funded report, analyst Daniel Yergin, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his history of the oil industry. It was also a PBS series called The Prize. From time to time, we like to talk to Leon Krause, who's the big anchor for KMEX, Univision station in Los Angeles.
Hi, David. How are you?
It's probably hard to overstate the impact that professional soccer has in Mexico, but give it a try. How important is it